The Assiniboine Park Zoo has been working hard to build a connection with the Churchill community. The construction of the new exhibit, called Journey to Churchill, is meant to strengthen this bond.
The Journey to Churchill exhibit is going to be the most comprehensive development aimed at climate change, polar bears, and other northern species. It is going to set a new global standard for polar bear exhibits around the world. And the benefits to bears are numerous. The biggest change is that the exhibits, the habitats that the bears will live in, will be much larger than what we used to have at Assiniboine Park Zoo. The other thing the bears and visitors will notice is that the environment, the habitat, is much more naturalistic. So what that means is it looks more natural, more like what you might encounter up in Churchill.
The new exhibit will not only look better, it will also provide the polar bears with more space.
The exhibit is 10 acres and includes outdoor habitats, but there's also a building called Gateway to the Arctic. And inside Gateway to the Arctic, there will be interactive displays. There's also going to be a Aurora Borealis theater, which is a 360-degree wraparound theater, stand-up theater. So people will go in and they'll be shown about an 8-minute video that explores how the Arctic is changing and how this is affecting the people and communities in our north. Another really exciting part of the Gateway to the Arctic building is something called Sea Ice Passage. This is an underwater tunnel where you will walk through this tunnel, and above and around you will be polar bears and seals swimming. They will be separate. They won't be in the same water, but they will be able to see and smell each other. So that's going to create a really interesting dynamic, and that is something that is completely unique. There is no other facility in the world that can offer that.
The underwater passage will have exciting features for both the polar bears and the new display of seals.
The pools that house the polar bears and the seals, they can take the polar bears out and let the seals move into that pool. Like, they might actually be able to swim in the same water, obviously not at the same time, but can you imagine what it's like for a polar bear to enter a pool and smell that, ooh, there were seals here? That's exciting for a bear.
Currently, while the exhibit is under construction, the polar bears can be found in the International Polar Bear Conservation Center. Each bear is slowly adjusting to zoo life and each other.
We had a lot of trouble putting these two boys together. We called it the city bear and the country bear. Storm's a wild bear from Churchill. Hudson's hand-raised. Two bears that came from very different points of life. So to have these two together right now, interacting in such a natural way, is huge. Hudson had to be taught that by Storm. He did not know how to do this. So what you're watching right now, they're learning from each other, and it's exciting.
All the polar bears except Hudson were originally from Churchill and can no longer live in the wild. This is where they are given a second chance.
And because they are both young bears, they're not adults yet. What they would be doing and what they'd be shown by their mothers is some of that natural behavior that would help them even capture food. And Hudson, yeah, he didn't know how to play. It took Storm a lot of time to get Hudson to actually engage him in play. And now if you watch, you'd never know that Hudson had no idea really what to do.
Getting used to the zoo can be difficult for some of the bears.
Storm, because he's a wild animal, I mean, he had to get used to, there's been a lot of snow this winter, so we've had bobcats, snow clearing stuff. Hudson thinks that stuff is wonderful. Anytime a machine comes by, he loves the machinery, thinks it's something to play with, and he'll run up and down. Storm was scared of that because he's not used to seeing that kind of thing. And he's watched Hudson's reaction, and now he comes right up to the fence. It doesn't scare him anymore. So Hudson's helped Storm get used to some of those city things.
The zoo is trying out new ways to keep the bears happy.
Storm and Hudson are going to spend their first night together. We separate them typically. They haven't been together for that long, since the end of January, and they're about to spend 24 hours together. So that's tonight. We're going to see what happens. And then our next one is to put Storm and the two girls together, and then Hudson and the two girls together, and then hopefully we're going to have all four together and see what happens.
The bears must be slowly introduced to one another. Hudson and Storm have been together for 1 month now and are slowly getting to know the two girls, Aurora and Casca.
Over the past few months, we've been gradually introducing the bears. First, Aurora and Casca were introduced, and they got along very well. That was an easy introduction. Then we introduced Storm and Hudson. That process was a little slower because obviously Hudson is a little new to this. He's not exactly sure how to be a polar bear. He's never been around other bears, but he did very well, and he and Storm now get along very well. The next step was to introduce Storm to the females, and that went very well. Casca and Storm have become great buddies. The goal is to have them getting along so that when Journey to Churchill opens, we can put the bears in different groupings. From time to time we may change it up. That's interesting for the bears to, you know, one day they wake up and they're with a different bear, the next day they might be with a different grouping. That's part of making things interesting for them and adding variety to their lives here. To see this process of the bears adapting to their new environment and to each other, that's really exciting. And these are amazing, beautiful, majestic animals. And to have them here and to be able to see kids and adults, big kids, so excited to see these animals, but that excitement can connect them to a bigger, you know, a bigger issue, a bigger, in terms of what's happening in terms of climate change, and hopefully will give them some kind of purpose and hope and maybe things they can do in their lives to help reduce or slow down climate change. That would be awesome.
By keeping the bears happy, the zoo hopes people will see how important having a proper environment is to the bears.
When people come to Journey at Churchill, they're going to have an amazing experience. Visually, there are fewer barriers to viewing the animals, but there's also an underlying message here about climate change and connecting people to the environment and to the sort of a very realistic, naturalistic landscape is really important so that they get a really true experience.
Although the new exhibit will have a realistic feel of the environment at Churchill, it still does not compare to the real thing.
It does not replace the experience of actually going to Churchill and seeing it for yourself. In fact, we think that coming here will actually encourage people to make that journey to Churchill, the actual journey to Churchill. So, you know, this is a good thing for us, but it's, I think, going to also be a good thing for the community of Churchill.
Once the Journey to Churchill exhibit is complete, there will be more than enough room to help the polar bears. The exhibit is scheduled to open in the fall of 2014.